on this episode of Postcards.
There's a lot of history in this park. Lac qui Parle State Park holds a very special place in my heart.
It is a unique park, and it is a unique history, and it deserves to be preserved.
I'm Mike Schultz. I'm the great-great-grandson of Eric and Karen Harsted, and I make documentaries.
Postcards is made possible by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota. Additional support provided by Margaret A. Cargill Philanthropies, Mark and Margaret Yakel-Julien on behalf of Shalom Hill Farms, a retreat and conference center in a prairie setting near Windham, Minnesota. On the web at shalomhillfarm.org. Alexandria, Minnesota, a year-round destination with hundreds of lakes, trails, and attractions for memorable vacations and events. More information at explorealex.com. The Lake Region Arts Council's Arts Calendar, an arts and cultural heritage-funded digital calendar showcasing upcoming art events and opportunities for artists in West Central Minnesota. On the web at lrac4calendar.org. Playing today's new music plus your favorite hits. 96.7 Cram. Online at 967cram.com.
Lac qui Parle State Park is located in the Minnesota River Valley, which was formed by the Glacial River Warren about 13,000 years ago. And when it did that, it exposed many great rock outcrops, which are known for their unique plant and animal communities. The Lac qui Parle State Park is just over 1,000 acres. Lac qui Parle State Park has the largest recorded cottonwood tree in Minnesota right next to its boundary. The cottonwood tree is actually in a little ravine, so it's protected from many of the storms that have come through the area. Probably its crowning jewel thing that it's really known for is its upper campground. There are people that come here for this campground that their RV has slide outs, and many campgrounds have many trees and they're not able to have their slide outs out in those campgrounds, and ours allows anything that's legal to pull on the highway. The early history of Lac qui Parle State Park is back in the 30s. It was talked about to create areas where people could come down to the lake to recreate. And as a result of that, during the WPA era, where they were trying to put people back to work, they built 3 beautiful historic structures out of stone and timber here at Lac qui Parle State Park. One of them is the historic map shelter, and then there's a historic toilet building, and then a warming shelter. The warming shelter actually has a gorgeous fireplace, and we use that in the winter for our ice luminary hikes that we have, usually the end of January during a full moon. There's a lot of history in this park. The park was originally talked about back in the early 30s. The Lac qui Parle Mission was established first.
So the Lac qui Parle Mission that you see behind me here was built or started in 1835. Joseph Renville, who was a fur trader, came here in 1826 and founded Fort Renville, which was just about a mile up the river here. It was across from the Wahpeton Band of Santee Dakota's village that was on the other side of the river. So he started a fur trading post. Joseph Renville's father was a French fur trader and his mother was Dakota. So he spoke French and Dakota, both languages equally. Some important cool things about the mission are it was the first place where cloth was woven, it was the first place where a church bell rang, and it was the first school in the Minnesota River Valley. So there's a lot of cool firsts that are associated with the mission. The history of missionaries can be kind of fraught with some issues as far as trying to wipe out culture and that sort of thing. But they seem to get along pretty well. There were, moments of learning between both of them, but they seem to do well. And men, women, and children were taught to read and write in Dakota language. So that was the first time that the language had been written down, so it was able to preserve some things that way. The mission was in service from 1823 to 1854. After Joseph Renville passed away, a different gentleman took over Fort Renville, the trading fort, and he was an irreligious man from the writings. So the mission fell into disrepair and eventually burned down, and then the mission was rebuilt as a WPA project at about the same time that the Lac La Parle State Park was built.
Lac La Parle State Park holds a very special place in my heart because it's a place where people can come to stay to recreate in this much larger public land base of all the way up and down the Minnesota River Valley. We might be a little niche down at the south end of the lake, but we welcome people to come here so they can explore the whole Minnesota River Valley.
For the average person, we live up in when I say up, we live in the upland, or the Great Lands as it's referred to. And out here on the prairie, we're up on that flat land. Now, when you come over here to the Lac La Parle County Park, you are going down into a river valley. It is like a miniature Minnesota River Valley in a sense. And so you're going to go from the prairie to a riverine environment. The Lac La Parle County Park in its entirety has a total of about 240 acres today. It is the original founding place, if you will, of Lac La Parle County because the very first settlers settled in this area right here. It's a rich example of the flora and fauna of a riverine environment. You might say it was always destined to be a park because of the way nature laid it out. The river created it, the Lac La Parle River flowing through here, trying to match up with the Minnesota River. And as such, it's a very dynamic river, and that river has cut into the landscape here and made these depressions and all these different features right here. Therefore, it is a unique environment and it should be preserved. I am David Allen Craigmile, and I am a volunteer at the Lac La Parle County Park. And I have been essentially volunteering here for quite a number of years, and I've been very interested in this park ever since I was in high school, actually. Lac La Parle County started purchasing these various parcels individually, not all at once. And it became known as Lac La Parle County Park, whereas over the many years, it was locally known as Nash's Grove, because a group of the Nash family started settling here in the early 1870s. The original village was going to be called Bison City. It was a very much just an embryo town, our village, as you will. It was platted out, a store was opened, but a store on that day didn't mean much more than like a spare room in your house today where they had a few goods. The county commissioners that were elected were the ones that were looking out for Lac qui Parle Village and not Bison City. And so they chose Lac qui Parle Village as the county seat. And so then subsequently, the little store that had opened up over here picked up and moved their items over to Lac qui Parle Village. The cemetery over here being kind of in the woods, in the northern part of the Lac qui Parle County Park, it was decided that the cemetery should also be by the church. And so after about 1884, well then the cemetery was used over there, and there were probably no more people buried in the Lac qui Parle County Park Cemetery. It's like going back in time where there are horses riding on the trails like it used to be when the area was settled, crossing the river and all of that. It is a unique park, and it is a unique history, and it deserves to be preserved.
This story starts with a tragic death and ends in the lost city of Atlantis, but most of it happens right here. This is Harstead Slough behind me, or Harstead Lake if you're feeling generous. We're just outside of Donnelly, Minnesota, and in 1869, my great-great-grandparents, Eric and Karen Harstead, moved from Norway to their new home on this slough. I'm Mike Schultz. I'm the great-great-grandson of Eric and Karen Harstead, and I make documentaries. This is Jeannie Ennen. She's also descended from Eric and Karen Harstead. We're third cousins, and she lives on their farm here in Donnelly.
I am the fifth generation of the Harstead family to live on this farm place, and this is, as far as we know, the original house. So Eric Harstead was my great-great-grandfather, and he settled here with his wife Karen and their three sons in 1869. They were some of the first pioneer settlers in Stevens County. They came from Norway, they came through Quebec and Racine, Wisconsin, and then they came up and they worked on the railroad as far as Benson, which is about 40 miles from here. And they bought a team of oxen and a wagon and a cow and headed north and settled here. I have the trunk that they brought here from Norway, and I use it actually in my house every day. It's a TV stand. And to me, that trunk says a lot about who they were and what kind of people they were. There's nothing fancy except for the writing on it, but it was very serviceable. They did what they had to do to survive and to make a new life for them and their children. And so they started with very little and built quite a life for themselves.
That was true until February 1873.
Well, it started off as a very nice day with water dripping from the eaves. From the account that I've been told, he walked to Morris, to the mill, to grind feed or wheat, I assume, and a storm came up. And he got as far as the lake, and I don't know where on the lake he got. And they found him the next morning, leaning against his sack of flour or whatever it was. Because he was so cold, when they warmed him up, the cold went in and stopped his heart. So he died, and his wife was left to raise 4 kids on this place. The oldest was 12, and the youngest was 2. So that was quite a She was quite a woman. I have her picture hanging in my living room, and whenever I think I'm having a bad day, I look at that picture and I think, you have nothing to complain about. She never saw an easy day in her life, and I have some of her in me. So to me, that gives me a real grounding and a real source of strength to know the kind of people I come from.
I like the shirt that you have on.
Yes, I gotta advertise for Donnelly.
I met up with some more of my cousins to ask them about Eric and Karen Harstead at Donnelly Hall, which was once used for roller skating.
So Eric and Karen Harstead would be my great-great-grandma and grandpa. They were the first ones to actually settle in Wrensville Township.
The only thing I know is there was no trees here at the time. This was all prairie, and when you got a snowstorm, you got a snowstorm. And he went to town to get groceries, and he got as far as the slough, and he was tired, so he sat down by a rat mound, you know, out there.
He got tired and laid down, went to sleep, and he froze to death. So that's why it's Harstead Slough, I guess. As far as I know.
It's called Harstead Slough, that's the name of it, but the DNR actually considers it a lake.
Do you feel a little insulted that it's called Harstead Slough when it's actually a lake?
Well, yeah, because, you know, slough isn't quite as, you know, professional name as a lake, but.
They named the slough after the Harsteads. Why didn't Donnelly get to be called Harstead, Minnesota?
I don't know, I mean, I guess it's just words on a map, and but.
So to have the slough named Harstead Slough is really cool. And you asked earlier if I thought that Donnelly should have been named after them. I think they were too humble to have wanted a town named after them. I think it's more fitting to the kind of people that they were, that they would have rather have had the slough named after them. I think it's kind of who they were.
Maybe I'm taking this too personally on behalf of my pioneer ancestors, but how do we decide who gets a town named after them? And where did the name Donnelly come from? Do you know who was Donnelly named after?
Oh boy, I don't know if I know that or not.
Ignatius Donnelly, you know, like, he started this town. That's what the rumor is, but I don't know that much about it, so.
So I know Donnelly is named after Ignatius Donnelly, but I don't know anything about the story or why it was named after him. So who was he? And why was Donnelly named after him?
It's a weird name. Who was Ignatius Donnelly?
He was a very well-known person. He was a Republican, he was a Democrat.
He was lieutenant governor of the state of Minnesota.
He was a writer.
A writer of fiction and or pseudoscience.
This is the, the kooky part.
He was a kind of a prophet.
You know, he has the book Ragnarok.
The story about the comet that struck the Earth.
Yeah, the nonfiction can be really apocalyptic.
Donnelly was a town builder, a town founder, a kind of real estate developer, a gentleman farmer.
He was a two-term congressman. He tried to become a United States senator. He also ran for president of the United States.
Yeah, but I think he did a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's arguably the most famous Minnesotan worldwide in the 19th century.
This is Ignatius Donnelly, or rather, an actor I've hired to play Ignatius Donnelly. Here's the real Ignatius Donnelly. And here's Jeff Kolnick. He's a history professor. I interviewed him at the Dakota County Historical Society because they have a giant map of their county on the floor.
When I decided to study populism, at that point I kind of became a freak for Ignatius Donnelly.
Donnelly was born the son of an Irish immigrant in Philadelphia in 1831. He moved to Minnesota in 1857.
It's hard to think of Minnesota as the West, but when Donnelly moved to Minnesota, it was very much the West.
And the first thing he did in Minnesota was to build a whole town. No, not this town. His first town was Nininger.
So Donnelly, he bought up land there with a partner, and they tried to sell it. But Nininger failed, so it's kind of nothing but the road to it and a historical marker and less than a ghost town.
My name is Patrick Coleman. I've been acquiring books for the Historical Society for the past 40-some years, and a fan of Donnelly's for a lot longer than that. I think of Donnelly as the most interesting Minnesotan ever, and if I could go back in time and talk to any Minnesotan, this is the guy that I would want to talk to. If you're the son of an Irish immigrant, I think you're well aware of oppression, and so I think the purpose of Ignatius going into politics was to improve other people's lives. He was as progressive as Bernie Sanders, and of course, back to his Irishness, he was very much a Joe Biden. By my count, he had run for office 17 times and lost 9 of those times and withdrew a couple of times. He had these defeats that really took a lot out of him. It just killed him. After one important campaign that he lost, he wrote,
"All of my immense labor has been for nothing."
Which finally brings us back here.
I know kind of what happened and how Donnelly got named, because when the railroad came through, they actually named it Douglas Station. And then Ignatius Donnelly came out here.
Donnelly bought a bunch of land, a lot of land.
These are the time of the Bonanza farms. And on one level, Donnelly was an opportunist. So he bought that land as a speculative property when it was cheap.
And at the time, a lot of town names got changed, and he just requested that this become Donnelly.
And actually, then they did name it after him.
Maybe this was ego-driven, but he wanted to be remembered. He wanted to make his mark on society, and he did.
Ignatius split his time between Nininger and Donnelly for several years, but farming is hard.
Oh, I am much better fitted to write books than to run a farm of this size.
Yeah, Atlantis was a bit of a publishing sensation.
In his first major book, Donnelly claimed with great fanfare that the very fictional Atlantis was actually a very real place.
The description of this island given by Plato is not fable, but veritable history.
What he does is he goes out into the world and finds cultural artifacts that match up. Pottery in South America that matches pottery in Egypt, and this explains that there was this one culture that had sent ships out across the world and influenced everybody. It sounds pretty kooky, especially to a 21st century audience.
We don't really know deep down if he believed it or not. What we do know is that he believed it would sell books.
Atlantis was a massive bestseller, and it gave Ignatius a much-needed win.
My books have lifted me out of the dirty cesspool of politics.
His follow-up wiped Atlantis off the face of the earth with a comet.
There may be, even now, a comet coming with glowing countenance and horrid hair to overwhelm you and your possessions in one common ruin.
You think the title of Ragnarok is badass. Have you seen the first edition of the book with the gold embossed comet? I mean, it's a beautiful book.
Unfortunately, his next book was less well received.
Definitely the most controversial was The Great Cryptogram.
There is no doubt Francis Bacon was the author of the so-called Shakespeare plays.
And that's where he made his reputation as a kook.
If we commence to count from the end of scene 2, column 2, page 54, backward and up the first column of the same, the 477th word is the word son, and 477 is precisely 9 times 53. And so I had Francis Bacon, Nicholas Bacon's son.
Ignatius Donnelly was a bit of a hot mess.
I have dipped into the nonfiction, but that doesn't interest me as much as his fiction, like Caesar's Column especially. I categorize it as a dystopian novel, but it is science fiction too. It takes place in 1988. There are things like TV in it, and in the end, the heroine and the hero of the novel, get on an airship and go to Uganda and start a utopian community in Uganda. And Caesar's Column eventually sold almost 1 million copies.
Donnelly's books were the blockbuster movies of his time. But to be so famous, and now 150 years later, to be so forgotten, it disturbs me a little bit. It doesn't give me much hope for the rest of us, no matter what we do.
That's the fate of the world, isn't it? I'm thinking about that because I'm about to retire, and here at the Historical Society, I've spent a lifetime trying to do something important, and nobody will give a fig in 5 years. You do your best and you work your hardest and you try to make an impact, and then at some point in time you have to give up the idea that that's going to be lasting, because very little is.
In the last 10 years of his life, Donnelly tried to build a third political party that better matched his progressive views. It didn't work.
While I would like to be something greater than I am, it squeezes one's heart to see the years slip away.
Ignatius Donnelly died on January 1st, 1901, the first day of a new century I think he would have enjoyed. And that's the secret history of Donnelly, Minnesota. Built by immigrants, named for the son of an immigrant, and cared for, ever since, by their ancestors.
So they're not just my ancestors. I feel like growing up hearing these stories and knowing these stories, they're very real to me. I feel like I know them. Yeah, and I feel like I need to carry on what they started. They wanted to make a difference here and make a life here, and so do I.
Postcards is made possible by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota. Additional support provided by Margaret A. Cargill Philanthropies, Mark and Margaret Yakel-Julien on behalf of Shalom Hill Farms, a retreat and conference center in a prairie setting near Windham, Minnesota. On the web at shalomhillfarm.org. Alexandria, Minnesota, a year-round destination with hundreds of lakes, trails, and attractions for memorable vacations and events. More information at explorealex.com. The Lake Region Arts Council's Arts Calendar, an arts and cultural heritage funded digital calendar showcasing upcoming art events and opportunities for artists in West Central Minnesota. On the web at lrac4calendar.org. Playing today's new music plus your favorite hits, 96.7 Cram. Online at 967cram.com.